Hey, everybody, and welcome back. We're diving deep today into a really fascinating family dynamic. We're going to be talking about a daughter raised by a narcissistic mother, and get this, an absent father. We're going to see how that unique combination kind of shapes her personality and relationships as she grows up.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex scenario. I think heartbreaking is a good word for it, but
Yeah,
if we can understand what's really going on, I think that can be incredibly insightful, especially for people who have experienced this firsthand or maybe know someone who has.
absolutely. And, we're not here to judge or point fingers or anything like that.
Right.
We really just want to understand, some of the patterns and challenges that might come up and hopefully offer some hope and understanding along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be drawing on research and what experts are saying to try and figure out how these early experiences might shape her sense of self, friendships, and even her romantic relationships.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation here, narcissism. But specifically, we're going to be talking about a subtype called fragile narcissism.
Fragile narcissism, yeah. What's interesting about it is that it's not always as obvious as like the classic grandiose narcissist that we picture. You know what I mean?
So not the stereotypical loud, attention-grabbing person.
Exactly.
Th-
Yeah.
th-
These people, they often struggle with like deep insecurity and low self-esteem, so they might actually seem shy
Huh.
or even self-effacing sometimes.
That's kind of counterintuitive, though, right? You don't
Yeah.
normally associate shyness with narcissism.
I know, right? It's a real paradox.
Yeah,
They still crave validation and admiration like any narcissist.
of course.
That insecurity, that makes them super sensitive to criticism and any kind of rejection.
So they would probably try to avoid any situation where they might be judged or found lacking.
Exactly, yeah. They might withdraw from social situations or even downplay their achievements just to avoid that scrutiny.
Wow, okay. So how does this all play out between the mother and the daughter? If the mom is a fragile narcissist, how does that affect how her daughter grows up?
Just imagine growing up with a mother who needs that constant validation, but is also super sensitive and emotionally unpredictable. It's a recipe for disaster, basically.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like the daughter would constantly be walking on eggshells, never knowing what's going to set her mom off.
That's a really common experience, actually. She learns to be hypervigilant, always trying to guess what her mom needs and changing how she acts to match that.
So she becomes a people pleaser at a really young age.
Yeah, basically. And because the mom's love and approval always depend on her doing the right thing, she ends up feeling deeply insecure and unworthy.
It's like she's never good enough, no matter how hard she tries.
And on top of all that, she doesn't have dad around. So that just adds to the feeling of being abandoned and not good enough.
Yeah, she's missing that paternal bond, that unconditional love that a dad can give.
It's a double whammy, basically. Mixed messages from mom, sometimes adored, sometimes criticized, and no stable male figure to counter that.
This is painting a pretty tough picture here. Sounds like she's entering adolescence with a lot of baggage.
It's true, but it's important to remember that it's not set in stone. These early experiences have a big impact, but she can still be resilient and grow.
That's a good point.
Mm.
So how do these early experiences show up as she starts making friends and, having relationships in adolescence?
Yeah.
Does she withdraw or does she overcompensate in some way?
That's where things get really interesting because she's so desperate for validation, especially during those teenage years when social acceptance is everything. She might go to extremes to get it.
So maybe she becomes super focused on how she looks,
Yeah.
trying to get attention and admiration.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
she might also get really competitive, trying to be better than her peers, even sabotaging them sometimes.
It's like she's repeating what happened with her mom, but now it's with her friends.
Right. And because she doesn't have that strong sense of self-worth, she's always looking outside for validation to fill that void.
So her friendships, they can be pretty superficial or even toxic, more about appearances and social status.
That's what we often see, yeah. She might be drawn to people who give her compliments and attention, even if the relationships are shallow.
It's almost like an addiction to being admired, even if it doesn't last.
Yeah, and because she's learned to be adaptable and tune into other people's needs, she can be really charming and even manipulative.
She might even play the victim, getting sympathy and attention.
It's a whole mix of behaviors, all coming from that deep need for validation and love that she didn't get as a child.
Wow, that's a lot to process. And we haven't even talked about romantic relationships.
I know, right? That's where things get even more complicated, especially with the absent father in the picture. We'll get into that next time. So as she gets older and starts thinking about romantic relationships, all those old patterns of needing validation and attention, they just get stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those insecurities have definitely come up, especially with those first crushes and, trying to figure out where she fits in romantically.
Exactly. And don't forget, she's probably internalized this idea that a woman's worth is all about attracting and pleasing men,
No.
which, can lead to some pretty messed up
Oh,
situations.
yeah, for sure. Especially without a father figure around. It seems like she'd be drawn to guys who are emotionally unavailable or even distant, like subconsciously recreating that dynamic.
That's a classic pattern we see all the time. Like, she's trying to fix the past, get that love and acceptance she never got from her dad.
But I bet that just leads to more heartache, right? Like she keeps going for guys who can't or won't give her what she needs.
You got it. And because she's so good at reading people and, becoming what they want, she might seem super charming and attentive at first.
Like too good to be true, almost.
Right. It's a survival tactic. She's learned to get approval and avoid rejection, but it can't last forever.
Because she's not really being herself, the relationship is built on a lie, basically.
Uh-huh. And that's where the problems start. As things go on and that first excitement fades, the cracks start to show.
So is that when the narcissism starts to come out?
Yeah, but it might be subtle, Maybe she gets really critical or controlling, trying to make her partner into what she wants.
So instead of just accepting him for who he is, she's trying to change him?
Exactly. And remember, she can't handle any kind of criticism or rejection. Even a tiny bit of disapproval can set her off.
So those little fights that most couples have could blow up really quickly in this relationship.
For sure. And she might resort to manipulation or even emotional outbursts to get her way, kind of like how her mom acted.
So she's bringing that chaos from her childhood into her love life.
Sadly, yeah. And here's the really messed up part. Once she feels like she's got that validation and admiration she wanted, she might actually start pulling away or even sabotage the whole thing.
Wait, really? Why would she do that? If she's getting what she wants, why not just be happy?
Because deep down, she doesn't think she deserves it. It's almost like she's testing her partner, waiting for him to prove her right, to show her that she's not worthy of love.
So she makes it happen herself, pushes people away to avoid getting hurt.
It's a defense mechanism, a way to protect herself from being truly vulnerable.
But that's got to leave the other person feeling totally confused and abandoned.
And that's the heartbreaking cycle. She pulls them in, gets the validation she needs, then pushes them away, and the whole thing starts again with someone new.
So where does that leave the relationship? Does she just cut it off completely, or is there a chance she'll come back?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about next. It's a pretty complicated and frustrating dance where love, need, and manipulation all get mixed up.
Okay, so we've been talking about how this daughter with a narcissistic mother and missing dad, how she looks for validation in her relationships and then pushes people away.
Right. It's like this constant back and forth because of all those insecurities.
That leaves everyone around her confused, right?
Yeah, a lot of hurt and confusion for sure.
So what happens to the relationship? Does she just disappear, or could she come back?
Well, it really depends, on the situation and the person.
Okay, so let's look at some of the possibilities here.
One scenario is that she just ghosts her partner completely, like cuts off all contact and moves on to someone new.
Oof, that's got to be rough for the person she leaves behind.
Yeah, it's a really painful form of abandonment.
But I don't get it. Why would she do that? I mean, if she's getting the attention she wants, why not just stay?
Remember, she doesn't really believe she deserves it.
Right, right.
So she kind of sabotages the relationship to prove herself right, that she's unlovable.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. She pushes people away so she doesn't have to face the risk of being truly seen and rejected for who she is.
Protecting that fragile ego.
Now, another possibility is that she keeps that connection loose, keeps her ex kind of on the back burner.
So she's not all in, but she's not letting go either.
Yeah, she might reach out sometimes, a flirty text here and there, or liking a post online, just enough to keep him interested.
Testing the waters, seeing if she can still get a reaction.
And maybe even making him jealous, proving that she's still desirable.
That's pretty manipulative.
For sure, it's all about boosting her ego and feeling in control.
But that just messes with the other person's head.
Yeah, it creates so much uncertainty and anxiety, makes it hard to move on and find healthy relationships.
Okay, so what about getting back together for real? Is there a chance she'll come back and want to commit fully?
It's possible, but it doesn't happen often.
And what would it take?
She would have to really understand herself, and be willing to face those deep insecurities that are driving her behavior.
So she has to own up to the hurt she's caused and actually want to change.
And she needs a partner who's patient and understanding and sets good boundaries.
That's a lot to ask.
It is, but not impossible. If she really wants to break free from those destructive patterns, she can heal and grow.
So there's hope, but it's going to be tough.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember this is just one possibility. Not every daughter with a narcissistic mom will be like this.
Right. There's a lot of factors that can affect how these early experiences play out in relationships.
And we have to be careful not to make generalizations or stereotypes.
So today we really wanted to explore what might happen in this particular family dynamic.
Yeah. And hopefully give some insight to anyone who's dealing with similar issues.
We've covered a lot of ground today, starting with the impact of a narcissistic mom and an absent father on how a daughter develops and forms relationships.
There's definitely a lot to think about.
We talked about her deep need for validation, how she seeks attention and then pushes people away.
And all the difficulties that can come with creating healthy, lasting connections.
And yeah, we talked about the possibility of healing and growth, but it's definitely a journey that takes self-awareness, commitment, and support.
It's a good reminder that our past can influence us, but it doesn't have to control us.
We always have the power to choose a different way.
And create a life that's more fulfilling and true to ourselves.
Thanks everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful and informative.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.